Entrepreneur stage. We're going to listen to a story of a young Nigerian called Tolu Eros. Yeah, the billionaire chef. I think you're going to love watching this.
Because the African story hasn't always been told correctly. I remember a couple months ago, somebody telling me that I may want to consider changing the name The Billionaire Chef. And this was because Americans like a humble immigrant story. And I laughed. And I said, well, I'm not a humble immigrant. I am the billionaire chef. I've been cooking for billionaires all my life. I come from wealth. I come from a wealthy culture. And so I'm not going to dumb that down in order to fit in. You're either going to like it or you're not. And so right here, what I do is telling you about my people, my culture, and the wealth of our culture and our cuisine, right? And so as an entertainer, I was able to do that, or I'm able to do that by telling stories about my culture and tying it back to the food that I'm presenting to you. So I want to tell you a story about the Yoruba people. I am going to make something from the Yoruba people. If you go to any country, and you want to learn about the country, inspired by my environment for the most part, and so I constantly surround myself around, good energy, good people that change the West African culinary food scene. I want to be remembered as the man who made a lot of Black West African chefs' dreams a reality. I want to be remembered as a culinary artist or a culinary entertainer that lived a full life. I want to say that I was probably 13 when I started business in the food scene, I would say. I started off selling cheese balls to the lady in my tuck shop. And then taking that on, I went to university, and in university, I started selling chicken under a brand called The Chicken Guy. This was in the UK. So I went to school in the UK. I studied international business management at the University of Wolverhampton. And at the University of Wolverhampton, I started to sell chicken to just my students, my co-students, But whilst I was doing that, I also did a lot of jobs, work in the hospitality scene. I worked as a bartender. That was my first job, was working as a bartender. And then I also worked as a waiter, worked in the kitchen, and then did a bunch of other things in sales and marketing, customer service. And then when I was done with uni, I moved back home in 2008 to join forces with my mom to start a restaurant. We opened a restaurant called La Saison in 2008, or rather we bought a restaurant called La Saison in 2008. And that was the beginning of my career officially in the food business. We shut that down in 2011. And then in 2012, I opened the bakery, Cookie Jar. And I would say my cookies made me famous, because I think when I opened Cookie Jar was when a lot of people started to hear about the Chef Eros name. I trained myself to become a pastry chef, and then also trained myself to become a cuisine chef. Got the moniker name The Billionaire Chef from catering for a lot of billionaires in Nigeria. And it just kind of stuck. Forbes wrote an article, The Man Who Knows What Billionaires Eat for Lunch. A lot of my friends kept calling me the Billionaire Chef, and then one day I changed my name on Instagram to the Billionaire Chef, and I got verified immediately. Studied international business management in the United Kingdom, lived in London, and when I got my O1 visa and I started looking for a place, I happened to find a place that is right across the street from Netflix and up the road from CNN, and so I guess it was meant to be. I was definitely an outspoken child. I didn't read a lot, but I understood a lot, and I asked a lot of questions, and I took risks. And I think that's still who I am today. I am very outspoken. I say what's on my mind. I do what I think I want to do. I don't just think about it. I think about it and I do it. I think that child inside of me is still willing to take so many risks. And living in Nigeria and living a very successful business in Nigeria, to move to Los Angeles, it's almost like a child of acting, right? It's almost like the child inside of me who wanted to just run with it, The adults in me would have said, sit down, calculate this. Does this make sense? Does this add up? But the child in me didn't think about it and just went with the flow. I had to create a niche for myself, right? And so if you ask me what my niche is, it's storytelling alongside modern West African cuisine. So it's not just modern West African, but there's also storytelling. And then I also have a unique presentation style. that you can sort of tell that I made this or I plated this. And then also finding my flavor profiles, right? I know what I like and I cook for myself first. If I don't like the taste of something, I ain't cooking it. I've always wanted to be an entertainer. I just happen to find myself as more of an entrepreneur and then with a niche in the food scene. And I was just going with the flow for the longest time, trying to figure out if I was eventually going to maybe go to film school or pursue music, things that I was passionate about as a kid. I definitely knew that music wasn't going to be the core, but I wasn't sure what was going to happen with my passion for screenplay.